Many of our colleagues on the other side would have us believe we must simply move on from the horrid policy violence enacted on so many marginalized communities over the last 4 years of the Trump administration. Well, I certainly refuse to just move on. To be clear, we will not move on until there is accountability, until there is restitution, until there is justice for these families, and until every single one of these 628 children are reunited with their parents. The trauma inflicted on these children by the United States government will always be a dark stain on our nation's history. I'll never forget what I witnessed during our trip to the southern border. Mothers who I held in my arms as they cried out for their babies and begged for help. It is something I will never forget, something our nation must never forget, and something we as policymakers must ensure never happens again. And while today's hearing is on the Trump administration's cruel and callous family separation policy, it's important to recognize that for decades, our immigration system has been built on separating families. From those seeking asylum at the border to the families preyed upon by ICE in the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District and communities across the country every single day. So we must look at this issue holistically and work to build an immigration system that finally centers the dignity and humanity of all our immigrant neighbors. So Inspector General Horowitz, thank you for your work on this report. It's clear that the Trump administration officials knew full well the pain and harm they were inflicting with this policy. On Tuesday, President Biden signed an executive order to create a task force to reunify the hundreds of families that were separated as a result of this policy. It's an important step towards healing. But healing also requires that we hold these individuals accountable who are the cruel masterminds behind these policies. Your report notes that former Attorney General Jeff Sessions declined to be interviewed by your office as a part of the review. This was despite him being a driving force in leading DHS to separate families by referring parents for prosecution. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you believe Mr. Sessions should have been interviewed?
Absolutely.
He was largely responsible for implementing the zero tolerance policy and continuing to prosecute parents even after his own officials told him they could not provide basic information to courts about the separated families. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Your report also found that Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein was also heavily involved in the decision to separate families. In fact, Mr. Rosenstein was recorded on a call instructing U.S. attorneys not to decline any cases due to the age of children in family units. Like former AG Sessions, Mr. Rosenstein was also made aware of rampant problems from the U.S. attorneys as separations increased. Did your investigation suggest that Mr. Rosenstein took any action to try to stop the policy, even as department resources were overwhelmed and thousands of families were being separated?
So what we found is the policy was implemented in May, and in June, no steps were taken by the department, including by Deputy Attorney General or others in the department, to change the policy while it was underway. And that only ceased on June 20 when the executive order was issued. Mr. Rosenstein did go to meetings with the courts, did have meetings with the prosecutors, but the policy itself was unchanged.
Child abuse, plain and simple. I don't know how they sleep at night knowing they employed someone responsible for this type of injustice. It's really beyond me. Inspector General Horowitz, your report brings us closer to the truth. I look forward to working with my colleagues to ensure that it will bring us even closer to justice. Thank you, and I yield.
Thank you, Congresswoman.